Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Tonight, we're going to be discussing the Southern Baptist Convention. They have gone woke, and now they're on the verge of going broke. And this is an axiom or a saying that's used a lot in conservative media. I guess some of the most prominent examples of going woke and going broke are Ubisoft, the AAA game studio, famous for Assassin's Creed. They have been woke for a very long time, and after successive failures in the gaming industry, they are now on the verge of, financial collapse and bankruptcy. So you do actually love to see that. We got other examples that we can point to. Disney, I remember when their stock was actually really good and worth buying. I sold my Disney stock way before it fell below what it was that I bought it at, because I think I bought it around COVID, because I predicted the dip for COVID and got Disney then and sold it subsequently after. So that's another example of a company that's gone woke, and they really collapsed their stock, their value, because you can't just make nine-figure woke turds and continue doing that and expect to make money. But the Southern Baptist Convention is somewhat the same way. They have a massive uh, liquidity crisis, and that's what we're going to dive into today. And it stems from them going woke, from them embracing the Me Too movement, from them embracing Rachel Den Hollander, who is a grifter, who is in part grifted the Southern Baptist Convention and helped inspire much of the folly that they have participated in. So there's a lot to discuss tonight, but what's funny is the Southern Baptist Convention is finally starting to have an adult conversation. And this is like the first time since I've been covering the Southern Baptist Convention, which has been, I don't know, 4.5, going on 5 years, that I've been covering the Southern Baptist Convention. They've never operated at an adult level. This is not an organization that is comfortable having adult conversations, serious discussions about things and debate and stuff like that. They are rather childish. They are easily manipulated. And that is how the messengers fell for Hannah Kate Williams, who is a serial liar. I don't know if there's anyone I've covered on Evangelical Dark Web that's more of a liar than Hannah Kate Williams. I know she's personally slandered me, but in reality, a lot of the claims she has about her story are not true. There is no basis for them. It came out that the people that she was living with, she was mooching off of them and running up credit card debt and student loan debt, the two worst debts out there, on their dime. She was taking advantage of them. And what she did to the people around, what she did to the Southern Baptist Convention, so full of hate, she did it right to the people that took care of her. So you hate to see that, but at the same time, there's also a vindication from God at the same time. So what we're seeing is also, in a way, it is the judgment of God on the Southern Baptist Convention, because they went woke and now they have to have some difficult decisions about whether or not they want to repent. And I don't think they do. There's a lot of stuff going on in the Southern Baptist Convention, and they're still as woke as ever. So we're going to talk about that as well tonight. So there's my opening salvo, my opening hot take. I don't know if you had any impressions that you want to add,
I
as we're
mean,
getting into the
there's a
story.
lot there's a lot of precursors and signs that kind of lead us to where we are now with the Southern Baptist Convention subtly, I guess, coming to the conclusion and acknowledging that there is a liquidity crisis. I mean, obviously they were selling their building in Nashville, which, that's downtown Nashville. Primo real estate, a lot of their headquarters and stuff operate out of that building. So the fact that they're trying to sell real estate assets in part to pay for lawsuits is a major sign. We don't even know how many millions they've spent on these things, other than that it is millions. And even if you look at like NAM's financial statements, I was looking back over an article I wrote on what their 2023 ministry report says. They might call it the 2024, but it's their financials for fiscal year 2023. And cooperative program giving to the North American Mission Board fell by 3.79%. So that's year over year decline in cooperative program contributions to their own organization. So that either means that fewer people are giving money to the cooperative program, which would account for headline risk that the SBC has basically taken on. So people are dissuaded from donating to it, or there's something else taxing the cooperative program that's preventing that money from going to the missions organizations. But a nearly 4% decline year over year is staggering. And again, these organizations almost bank on the idea that the money is going to keep going in the positive direction. So the idea that them receiving fewer dollars in from the cooperative program, becoming more dependent on Annie Armstrong, is a pressure against these organizations. And I imagine it's the same thing for the International Mission Board. I imagine other entities have this same problem.
Yeah, you alluded to they want to sell their headquarters in Nashville, Tennessee. It's a prestigious headquarters. Like, it is good real estate, and it's prestigious real estate. Like, there's a prestige value to having a Southern Baptist headquarters right where it is. I'm not trying to sound like Redeemed Zoomer, because I'm going to be honest. Like, I prefer churches with ample parking over churches that are in the downtown Main Street. Just saying. It's kind of how I feel about that. I know he disagrees, but having it in the middle of a city with prime real estate, and they're trying to sell it for $35 million. We're going to get the update on that, but the spoiler on that is they have not sold it yet, and they're not sure it's going to sell. I mean,
commercial
35,
real estate.
Yeah, commercial real estate, not a
that
big
kind of
thing
stuff
right now.
is a very difficult sell. Even though Nashville, I mean, that's a nice part of Nashville. There is seemingly some development there. I was, been to Nashville, so it is the nice part.
And 35 million is a lot to ask for. I look at expensive houses on Zillow. They sit way longer because they're waiting for the right person to come along, which is a lot fewer than, the regular middle class houses. So there's a lot fewer people chasing idyllic properties. So first thing that we have to discuss is Clint Presley, who's president of the Southern Baptist Convention. And let me just give my opening opinions on him. He is someone that has kind of surprised me. He has been an upgrade from Bart Barber. Bart Barber is really bad. I'm sorry, Tom Askell. Bart Barber was terrible. He was not an upgrade from Ed Litton. That was just so wrong of you to say that, because Ed Litton, we kneecapped him with the whole Sermon Gate thing. He got kneecapped from that because he was plagiarizing or buying sermons from the same place as J.D. Greer. So he got kneecapped, and that kind of tore apart his legitimacy the entire time during his tenure as president for 1 year. But Bart Barber came along, and he was just so maliciously incompetent. He got the Southern Baptist Convention embroiled in all these lawsuits, and including himself. He got himself sued as well. And he lied to the American public on 60 Minutes and badmouthed and attacked the church over a lie. He would later tell the truth in a deposition. So when he's actually under oath, he tells the truth. But he did lie on 60 Minutes by saying that the Southern Baptist Convention had this epidemic of SA, which we'll discuss later on as well, because it turned out not to be the case. They lied. People read the headline. They didn't read the actual guidepost report. And it showed. And they were willing to brand and flagellate themselves as a convention. And then Clint Presley's come along. He is a company man. He is from the state of North Carolina, which is a hub of power in Baptist circles. North American Mission Board, I think, is based there. We got the Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary is based there. J.D. Greer is based there. A lot of powerful Southern Baptist forces in the North Carolina camp. And they don't necessarily always get along with the Texas camp. And then there's the Louisville, Nashville camp. So there's a lot of different camps in the Southern Baptist Convention that are not only ideologically based, but also location based. So with that said, Clint Presley's tenure has been a lot quieter than Bart Barber's. It's been a lot more competent than Bart Barber.
Yeah, I mean, that's probably the big difference is, I mean, he's a Presley being more the company man, then that means he operates it, as the company man. Barber's kind of a buffoon, almost like a lovable oaf at times.
Well, he's got cows that he named Annie and Lottie or whatever.
So
So
he very folksy, very likable, but at the same time not very competent and obviously very subversive.
yeah, and keep in mind, Bart Barber, I believe, was a trustee at the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. So this guy was bad news already. Anyone who's a part of that organization, just that is a red flag if you were a part of that organization. I believe y'all, maybe it wasn't that. Maybe it was the Southwestern Baptist Theological uh, Seminary. He was involved in one of those two things. So he's involved with some of the firings there. Yeah, particularly, I believe he played a role in the Bobby Lopez firing, and yeah, lot of shady details with Bart Barber. But here's Clint Presley trying to insist that there's financial transparency at the Southern Baptist Convention. So this clip, I think, is pretty funny.
I'll press it a little further. I thank the Lord that we have entities that operate with responsible transparency. Tired of hearing that we don't have transparency. We do have transparency. Been a lot of talk here. And the trustees that we have been given at our boards are providing the right oversight. It's like what goes on in my church. Like what happens at our church, that God raises up from the church committee that is on a finance committee and a professional staff committee is what we call it. They make the decisions when it comes to compensation of the pastors on staff. And every year those committees change. They come from the congregation. They're being transparent but responsive. I am thankful.
So there is Clint Presley. And let me just give you the before. So he likens the Southern Baptist Convention to a Porsche. And yes, to a Porsche, a very specific type of Porsche. And I'm
911.
Yes.
911 Carrera or Jeep.
Yeah. That's the Porsche. I'm like 911. That can't be, but that is what he said.
Yeah, that's.
I thought I was mishearing him, but
that's
yes,
the one that you would get.
So that is the car that he is comparing the Southern Baptist to. He says it's the greatest car ever made or something like that. And you don't have to reinvent the car. You just have to engineer the car gradually to not get complacent, but you don't need to redo the entire car. Is basically a giant metaphor, Emerson Orwellian metaphor. Just go Animal Farm and how that's an allegory. The Porsche is the allegory for the Southern Baptist Cooperative Program is what he's going for. Some might call him George Borwell for that. But anyway, he's basically saying that the cooperative program is a mighty fine vehicle. It does not need to be scrapped. We can't get complacent with it either, so we just need to fine-tune and engineer it. We need to get the engineers to fix some of the problems. And that was the cap. That is how he capped the analogy of the Porsche. So there's some more context. You can kind of respond to that.
Yeah, I'm sure the CEOs of Enron said the same thing about the company right before the rug got pulled out. I'm sure every person that pumps a meme coin or whatever, a personalized coin, says it's like a Porsche. It's the finest car ever made. You don't need to reinvent it. It's good to go. You don't have to worry about it. I'm sure a lot of people will say that things are not falling apart and it's reliable, good, and all that. There's nothing to see here, and that's basically what he's doing. But at the end of the day, if no one believes you, why would you go through that? But there is a sense where NAM is probably the most transparent of the SBC entities, given that they do release financial reports. But there is distinctions between what it releases versus what a 990 would release. The 990 would give salary information. NAM does not disclose salary information, for example. But NAM does disclose like some of their information regarding loans and financial operations that would not be required for 990. So there is some variance in what NAM discloses versus what they don't, which is how you can kind of tell that there is some financial problems happening over at NAM, as they are dealing with liquidity issues.
Well, it's the executive committee specifically that has the liquidity issues that we're going to cover tonight. But the North American Mission Board, if they were being financially transparent, you would know what the officers are making.
Yes, that's the biggest
Number
distinction that's
one.
lacking in what they disclose.
You would know what churches that they were planting and how much that these churches are being given. So just so there's no like, hey, we're giving $1 million to this mega church startup and we're only giving pennies to this country startup. So you can know. That would be the purpose of the
And
transparency. I'm
that
not
would be
saying they all have to
another,
be even, but
that would be another, I think, because that would be a distributed grant or whatever under 990.
right. So and under 990 reporting, they would know how much the officers are making and what grants they're distributing to the different churches that they're planting. I mean, this information is basic, but instead, all the Southern Baptist Convention, or at least all the North American Mission Board provides, is just overall 50,000-foot view of the financial picture.
Yeah, I mean, again, it gives the impression that every dollar that's given to Annie Armstrong is spent on church missions. And again, I would believe that's the same with the Lottie Moon offering and IMB, because again, if that's like 40% of their budget and 40% of their budget directly goes to activities labeled as like missions or church planting or whatever, they're able to make that claim.
Yeah. So I just don't buy it, because if they were actually transparent, you would know how much the officers are making. You would know,
and again,
how much of the churches that are planted by their resources,
and
because they take credit for all of it.
And a lot of the headline risk that they've been navigating has to do with major salaries being reported by people like what's his name?
Johnny Hunt.
Johnny Hunt.
And that's what that was a reference to, I think. I think Clint Presley does make a veiled reference to Johnny Hunt. And if he doesn't make the veiled reference, then definitely Jeff Eorg will make a veiled reference. But the idea that there's not financial transparency, I think the Southern Baptist Convention is trying to fight the Johnny Hunt case. Johnny Hunt has claimed an exorbitant salary from the Southern Baptist Convention. He's claiming like $600,000 in compensation in 1 year. And he's suing them for, I believe, $100 million. And some of his math kind of checks out. Like, he's going for, I think, 11 years, 10 or 11 years. So he's and he's trying to multiply that across different income streams that he had was hurt. So I guess he thinks he's going to get, I don't think he's going to get $11 million, $100 million, but I don't think it would be entirely unfair for him to get something from the Southern Baptist Convention, because I do think his case is strong. I've read the documents relating to the case, but for now, we should move on to Jeff Eorg, because Jeff Eorg has a very fascinating case, in my opinion. So let me pull that up, because Jeff Eorg is the president of the Southern Baptist Executive Committee, which is a big deal. So the Southern Baptist Convention had a major problem in that it had an executive committee vacancy caused by the events that that we've alluded to, and that Jeff Eorg is going to have an adult conversation about. So that's what's kind of interesting, is he wants to have an adult conversation, even though I think Jeff Eorg is part of the problem. He is a liberal, and he should be treated as such and viewed as such, because he opposed banning female pastors in the Southern Baptist Convention. There's your easy fail test, or test that he failed if you wanted to see if he had orthodox theology. No, he supports women pastors not being rooted out of the Southern Baptist Convention. So, yeah, he's a liberal. And he was pretty quiet, because whatever happens in Gateway Theological Seminary, does not get a whole lot of press, not a whole lot of eyeballs watching. So he's just able to exist over there. And I don't think he's playing kingmaker or attempting to, like Al Mohler or Danny Aiken. So he's just kind of and he's not like the guy getting thrown in to fix an unfixable problem like the dude at Southwestern. So Jeff Eorg he's risen. He was pretty much unanimously selected for this role that he's in. Like, they needed someone to fill. They tried to get Willie McLaurin to fill this role, and he was the longtime interim president, CEO of the executive committee of the Southern Baptist Convention, but he had a fake resume scandal that sunk him. So he's out. And then someone on the search committee wanted to nominate themselves for president of the executive committee, and that did not go over well. And I believe that was a liberal that wanted to do that, another liberal. So that didn't go over well. And then Jeff Eorg appears out as the consensus candidate. So that's the backstory on Jeff Eorg. He's been in there for about a year or two, a year and a half maybe. So let's roll tape.
In 2021, the Southern Baptist Convention adopted a consequential motion.
Okay, this is very quiet.
First, the messengers commissioned an independent investigation of the executive committee's handling of sexual abuse allegations.
Are you able to hear that well?
It is soft.
Okay, let me see if I can pull it up on Rumble, because that was... They're trying to make me look bad over here. All right, Southern Baptist Convention videos.
I mean, again, you wouldn't, just to reiterate, you wouldn't have to argue that you're financially transparent if you actually were financially transparent. Like, that wouldn't be a thing you would be talking about. It's just because you say you are doesn't mean you actually are, especially when the questions are, again, with the extravagance of salaries.
So I'm going to load it up on here, which will mean we'll have to play the clip in full. But the long story is that the Southern Baptist Convention in 2021, they adopted a motion that made it impossible to investigate the allegations that were made against them. And they had to decide to waive attorney-client privilege, which was a stupid decision at the time. This was very controversial at the time. It was a very dumb decision at the time. I just want to be very clear about that. We were all saying, those of us on the right, were all saying this was a stupid decision. The Southern Baptist Convention went headfirst into the stupid decision because a girl named Hannah Kate Williams decided to cry on the floor of the convention while I believe it was Grant Gaines made this motion to do this. So,
and even if you go back to the last SBC convention, the president, this goes back to the failed politic of Bart Barber, is that he had the opportunity to essentially claim victory on the sex abuse scandal and just put it to rest. And just take the off ramp, as they say in politics. And they still haven't done that. Even though they clearly, it's there, you can claim it. You can say, hey, we've spent a lot of this money, we've expended a lot of resources, and ultimately we honestly found that it was, a giant nothing burger.
Okay, so here's at least the part of the meeting that we're talking about. This happened on Monday, by the way.
In 2021, the Southern Baptist Convention adopted a consequential motion with several components. First, the messengers commissioned an independent investigation of the executive committee's handling of sexual abuse allegations. Second, the executive committee was instructed to surrender attorney-client privilege related to the investigation. Third, the motion called for the investigation and its aftermath to be paid for with cooperative program funds. As the executive committee implemented this motion, the controversial subject matter, coupled with waiving privilege and significant pressure from some leaders, resulted in the executive committee indemnifying the investigator, Guidepost Solutions. These decisions were controversial at the time, resulting in resignations by executive committee members and executive committee staff. Some voices objected to cooperative program funds being used as included in the motion. The executive committee made a good faith effort to respond to those concerns and protect the cooperative program by paying the costs from their reserves, which were about $14 million at the time. Now,
So, some backstory that was referenced there. Ronnie Floyd was president of the executive committee, and he resigned in, I believe, October of 2021. So the president of the executive committee resigned. That's why there's this big vacancy that Jeff Ewart filled like 2 years later, 3 years later. So some backstory there. He says it was controversial at the time, but to be honest, I really only think 10 to 20% of Southern Baptists oppose this. So there was an overwhelming consensus of people easily manipulated that fell for this. I could be wrong. I could go back and ask some people who were there, but I don't. If I recall, it was not that controversial. It was not that controversial.
It's probably a case if they voted for something, they didn't actually understand what they were voting for, yet they decided to either throw up the little paddle thing or, fill out the poll.
I mean, people went with the winning side.
Yeah.
There is I don't know what that bias is called, but there is, you want to be on the winning team. That way you always come out on top.
Years later, we know the financial cost of those decisions. Through December 2024, the Executive Committee has spent just over $13 million to fulfill the directives of the original motion and the results. To do this, the Executive Committee has reduced staff, now down to 22 full-time employees, cut programs, curtailed expenses, and spent its unrestricted reserves, which are now about $1 million. For the current fiscal year, the Executive Committee is working to secure a $3 million loan to meet its financial obligations. Looking ahead, we anticipate.
So I guess my understanding is that current fiscal year means that it goes convention to convention, is my understanding. So he's talking about loaning money for this fiscal year.
So we don't actually know what fiscal year, I don't know what their calendar is.
I don't know what their calendar is.
NAM matches the government.
So September.
Yes. I don't know if the other entities do the same.
So, and probably a lot of the entities do because they have meetings in September. So that would make sense. But fiscal year is what they're talking about here. So they're going to propose a 2025-2026 budget. So it's, I believe, cut into each of the years, and it's not a 2-year budget. So they're talking about for this fiscal year, they have loaned $3 million. They have borrowed.
So that could be from September to now, or Monday, I guess.
Because they're running out of money because this Johnny Hunt thing is coming up. And that's the heated one. The David Sills lawsuit against them is not as heated, but the Johnny Hunt one's got some fireworks. So just for some references here. And that, spoiler alert, he's going to have a controversial
pay at least another $3 million in legal $3 million in legal expenses next year as we defend against multiple lawsuits resulting from the decisions made in 2021. And since we cannot predict the outcome or timeline for these legal processes, we do not know the total legal expenses we may face over the next few years. But here's our present reality. Decisions were made by the messengers in 2021. Those decisions have consequences. Those consequences have costs. And those bills are due, and they must be paid. The pressing question then is, how do we fund an estimated $3 million in additional legal expenses in the 25-26 SBC and EC operating budgets? One possible answer is to sell the SBC building in Nashville. We are currently marketing the building for sale for $35 million. We do not know if or when the building will sell. However, we still must have a definitive alternative. For that reason, we're recommending a $190 million cooperative program budget for 25-26 with a $3 million priority allocation for SBC legal expenses and other costs associated with that original motion. This is a controversial and difficult recommendation to make. No mission-centered Southern Baptist wants to take this action. I don't. You don't. No one does. but we have exhausted other definitive options. We have used the executive committee reserves, we have cut staff and programs, we have borrowed money, and we are attempting to sell our building. We have reached a point where the instructions from the original motion must now be implemented, directly paying for the investigation and its results with cooperative program funds. If this budget recommendation is adopted, however, some pastors may consider redirecting their cooperative program gifts because they say, quote, I don't want my CP going to pay legal bills.
I want to stop him right there. Before we get to his response to the idea that people don't want to pay for that. So let's talk about the proposal, because that's an adult conversation that he wants to have there.
Yes and no.
And I mean, they're not repenting, but they are showing some buyer's remorse. And there is a difference between repentance and remorse. This is remorse. They made a stupid woke decision by embracing the Me Too movement and its consequences.
Well, is this remorse or is this cover your butt?
Well, his job, he was the guy thrown into, he was
I understand.
made president of the executive committee. So it is his job to manage the ship.
True, but is he just trying to cover his butt from making this proposal by blaming the messengers? And again, the messengers were
the messengers are at fault, but he was probably also one of the messengers that supported this.
Yeah, this is where, the old elite theory comes to mind is no, the messenger, like the Southern Baptist Convention is just manage public perception because that's all, it's democracy. And it's basically just the elites vying for the elites within the convention using democratic process to essentially get whatever they want. So the people in charge wanted this abuse council or this abuse task force. They wanted all these legal expenses, and he's just trying to cover his butt by passing the blame, not where it belongs with the heads of the SBC.
Where does it belong? Okay, so you're saying that
the people that brought this about, yes.
It was a motion made on the floor, though.
Oh,
and it was by Grant Gaines or Griffin Gullidge, or was it Grant Gaines that made the motion? The alliteration is really throwing me off here.
Wasn't there a committee that had to bring it forward for a vote?
They formed the Artif committee, which is still, I think, a thing. They funded the guidepost investigation.
I mean, keep in mind they've rejected numerous proposals for not for relevance or not being out of order on various issues. So it's not like they couldn't just find a reason to reject the
David Morrill at the convention last year made a motion modeled after this same motion, and it was ruled out of order for demanding cooperative program funds.
Yes. So it's not like they can't justify ignoring it or ruling it out. They passed it because they wanted to.
Well, it wasn't just that they passed it. The executive committee voted in September, so months after the motion was made to waive attorney-client privilege for this investigation. This resulted in their lawyers breaking up with them for being too stupid to represent. And Ronnie Floyd then resigned as president of the executive committee because he's a pretty well-off individual, and he does not want his personal assets tied to the Southern Baptist Convention. And that strategy has worked out pretty successfully. To his credit, he has avoided the liability by quitting. Rod Martin, I believe, also quit from the executive committee. So a lot of good people left the executive committee because they made this decision. It was a controversial vote. He is right that it was a controversial vote at the executive committee because the executive committee was more conservative than the convention.
Yeah, well, the people that actually are staring at the barrel of the decision.
That's not the case anymore. By the way, the executive committee is now more liberal than the convention. And that was showcased by the Mike Law Amendment. They recommended voting against the Mike Law Amendment in 2023.
Majority of these cases have nothing to do with, the action, the waiving of attorney-client privilege. Other than that, weakened the deck of the executive committee. But it has to do with the fact that they released. Yes, they released that information, which they shouldn't have.
No, not having legal protection during the guidepost investigation has had a lot of consequences. It's not that they waived attorney-client privilege for the after effects of it. No, they clearly haven't. It's for during the investigation, which slandered people and
Yes.
they put it out there.
Well, it's the fact that they published this information, which they shouldn't have.
It was a bad
That's
report.
what's-
It's inadmissible, and they've said as much in depositions. Bart Barber admitted that this report didn't find anything. And it only presents one side of the story in everything that it presents. So it raises a lot of serious questions. And there's also no such thing as an independent investigation. This investigation was paid for by the Southern Baptist Convention. It was largely people like Russell Moore and Beth Moore to some degree. Russell Moore and Rachel Den Hollander, who basically coaxed the investigation to go after their political enemies. A lot of it mainly Paige Patterson, who was vindicated in the legal case, and David Sills, who had an adulterous relationship with Jennifer Lyell, who would become one of the highest ranking female executives in the Southern Baptist Convention. Yeah, look at that. Did she sleep her way to the top? I don't know. I hear that's celebrated in conservative culture now. But anyway, let's get to his pitch to continue sponsoring the Southern Baptist Convention.
We'll speak to pastors now. And I hope you'll consider these next observations as you make your decision on this issue. First, paying legal bills with cooperative program funds is not a new practice. Our current situation is just more public than most. All SBC entities and state conventions employ attorneys or contract with law firms to represent them. We live in a litigious world, and it's only getting worse. We have always paid, and we will continue to pay indefinitely into the future legal costs of doing business in this culture, and those payments will be made with cooperative program funds. Second, the ethical dilemma for Southern Baptists is not centered on using funds to pay legal bills, but keeping our word and paying our debts. While the messengers who voted for the investigation may not have understood the full cost of their decision, and most Southern Baptists were not in the room when the vote was taken, the resulting bills are in our name, Southern Baptists, and they must be paid. Third, the executive committee.
I got to pause there. Are you serious? That would be like Donald Trump honoring the handshake agreements that Joe Biden made or Barack Obama made, and saying America's name is on the bill, so we gotta be in the Paris Accords.
Or, Ukraine right now.
Yeah, we got to support Ukraine. No, we don't have to support Ukraine. Donald Trump's president now. The Joe Biden handshake agreements with Zelensky are over.
No, we got to honor the Haitian refugees that just had their TPS revoked.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's such a bad argument. If I'm a Southern Baptist messenger and I voted against that because, I didn't suddenly stop being retarded after 2021. If I voted against that, I would say, no, I'm not going to give to defend this, because what did the Southern Baptist Convention do? They slandered. I would not give money so that they can defend their slander in court. I would, first of all, they should be pressured to settle out of court and sue for peace. They are going to take some L's here, and the whole process is an L for them. Because I would imagine Johnny Hunt is mostly, his lawyers are going to take a commission of this cut of this payday. I think that's how they're operating. Might be also how David Sills is operating. Southern Baptist Convention, they're getting billed for this daily because they're on the defensive here. So this is not worth defending for them. It's not worth defending if you're a Southern Baptist. No, tell them to sue for peace. It's just like Ukraine. Tell them to sue for peace.
So again, he's blaming the messengers and saying you got to foot the bill for our mismanagement of a problem. Even though, again, everything was done in bad faith. The messengers acted foolishly. The executive committee basically, jettisoned all their competent people because they knew what the fine print actually said. And you're left with the incompetent and a lot of the, the swamp creatures, so to speak. So what you had, I mean, essentially they're trying to blame the messengers when, again, they are the ones that mismanaged the information. By
They could have
releasing
opposed the
guidance.
messengers just like they do every single year on anyone who actually wants to make reform in the Southern Baptist Convention. You have no problem opposing those messengers, but
Yeah, every messenger that comes and saying they want NAM reform gets waxed or whatever. Even though, again, that doesn't necessarily
actually, in their
require
defense, the
them.
Southern Baptist messengers voted against financial transparency in NAM last year.
Well, that is
Or
true.
either that was a year before. All these Southern Baptist conventions that we cover really blend in. Like sometimes I forget that Rick Warren was 2023, not 2024, but they did disfellowship
No,
another female pastor church in 2024.
Yeah.
So it's very all these years blended, but 2021 does stick out because that was the Mike Stone, that was the Ed Litton, who was a dark horse that candidate that just overtook. So I just think these are terrible arguments that he's making, especially as someone who opposed this at the time. If I opposed this at the time, he is not moving me because I don't feel we're an independent Baptist church. We're not attached to the denomination because that is Baptist polity. And I would throw the Baptist polity in their face, even though the Southern Baptist Convention has claimed in court, they have lied in court that they are a hierarchical polity. So, roll tape.
Committee is defending the SBC in all these legal actions. We have never initiated any legal action against anyone. We are defendants. We are defending the SBC, the executive committee, SBC officers and personnel. We cannot control who sues us, but for the sake of our mission, we, the executive committee, are provided with the responsibility of providing a robust defense when lawsuits are filed against us. Fourth, we are spending a small fraction of SBC resources on legal expenses. Southern Baptist churches will receive more than $10 billion, with a B, in offerings in 2025. They will forward about $450 million of that through the cooperative program and give another $275 million to SBC mission offerings and causes.
So just to be clear, he's trying to make an argument that this is an insignificant amount of money. And that first stems from the fact that, all the Southern Baptist Convention churches in the world get $10 billion. And then you only give a small percentage of that $10 billion to all these other causes. It's, I don't know what the Latin fallacy that he's going for is, but he's trying to make it seem like it's insignificant amount of money, therefore you should think no big deal. Yeah, I like this comment from Arn. He says, attorney would say some lawsuits can be avoided, and all of these lawsuits could have been avoided.
Yeah, if you didn't use your research firm as your legal counsel, because what honest lawyer would actually have recommended releasing the report? Because obviously Guidestone would want to do that because, they can release it and not really suffer any litigation from it, but would like
they are being Guidepost, not Guidestone.
Sorry, Guidepost.
Guidestone is another Southern Baptist entity.
But I mean, if you had like actual general counsel in your vicinity, which I'm assuming the executive committee should have.
They do. It's not exactly a great situation that they have legally. Since you're cut out again, let me just say, yes, some lawsuits can be avoided. They chose to, I think the only lawsuit they couldn't avoid was the Hannah Kate Williams involved lawsuit. But she is such a compulsive liar that if she sued you, I would feel very good about my chances winning because she is such an uncredible witness. So that is really what they have to worry about, is stuff like that. Instead, they got Johnny Hunt and they got David Sills coming after them. And those two are way more formidable than, say, Hannah Kate Williams.
While $3 million seems like a lot to most Southern Baptists, it is a relatively small part of our overall financial resources of $10 billion that's being held by our churches, being used by our churches. Despite these perspectives, I'm still asked if we can push through this challenge and return to a more resolute focus on our mission in a few years. My answer is an unequivocal yes. And I say that for two reasons. First, I believe God is still using Southern Baptists as a force for good, and He will sustain us. And second, I say yes because I believe in Southern Baptist pastors. Southern Baptist pastors do not run from trouble. They walk toward it. They specialize in holding steady in messy situations.
So I'll cut him off right there because this is his sales pitch. It's a rah-rah sales pitch. And quite honestly, I'd rather listen to Clint Presley deliver one of those because, I don't know, he looks like he hits the gym a lot. So it seems a little bit more serious when he does it. So, but this is the buyer's remorse that the Southern Baptist Convention had. This was from their executive committee meeting this past Monday. And it just spells doom. I mean, that is the dire situation of the Southern Baptist Convention. And they have no end to these legal proceedings in sight. As far as I know, I think the David Sills case is like way off. The Johnny Hunt one's a little closer. I think they're scheduling a trial date, which I think is in the summer, if I remember. I mean, but they've had a lot of back and forth about the salary and the damages that Johnny Hunt has been requesting, and the Southern Baptist Convention denies that it was as much money as it is. But if you're so adamant that he wasn't making that much money, provide the receipts.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like they couldn't, given that, again, if, they can disclose 990 related, salary disclaimers without facing any legal penalty. And,
So,
and again, they're going to need a lot more than $3 million. That's just what they're asking for today.
yes, for this year.
So, and again, if they depleted 13 of $14 million in like reserves, then how much assets and money do they actually, or liquid assets do they actually have on deck? So they're going to need more money.
Yeah, they've spent like what, probably $13 million already.
Yeah, he said 13 of $14 million in reserves. So that means they don't have a war chest for anything. So
except the cooperative program.
Yeah.
That's their war chest. So I want to shift gears because we've talked about the buyer's remorse part. Again, not buyer's repentance. Let's just talk about how the wokeness continues. So this is an image from TGC 25, and you'll see that the Southern Baptist, I took it off. The Southern Baptist Convention is very much in bed with the Gospel Coalition this year. So again, this is the TGC 25. We got JD Greer as a speaker on how to grow as a Bible teacher and speaker. Interesting that Nancy Guthrie is on the panel. I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
Look, I just object to the notion of a woman being on a panel about how to grow as a Bible teacher and speaker.
Yeah, I feel like that's a pretty standard objection.
So that's without even knowing who Nancy Guthrie is off the top of my head.
She's not like, I wouldn't say she's a Beth Moore. So I am trying to be like fair and stuff like that. She's not Beth Moore.
Is she like Jen Wilkins though?
I don't think she's that bad either. But Jen Wilkins is also very Gospel Coalition.
Yeah, that's right.
So that's the JD Greer thing. I got another thing to show you. So JD Greer is speaking at TGC 25, which is the wokest, the biggest woke church conference this year. We also David Platt's going to be there. John Piper's going to be there. Jen Wilkin, the aforementioned Jen Wilkin's going to be there. So this is another event at TGC 25. Theology is for everyone.
That's
and what do you notice about this?
I mean,
We got
obviously, there's a woman in there that
okay, Jen Wilkin, female pastor. I believe she goes to Matt Chandler's church.
also, obviously, the
Well,
Lifeway,
pastor. To be clear.
and Midwestern. So you have
Baptist,
two,
yeah.
yes. So you have two SBC entities sponsoring this event.
And if you're unfamiliar, Jason Allen, who's at this event, is the president of Midwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. So them along with Lifeway are sponsoring this event. And there's another entity sponsoring the event. I believe it's the Send Network is sponsoring an event at the Gospel Coalition. I'll need to pull that up real quick. I won't have that on screen, but let me just pull that up real quick.
It is
because
certainly.
I know I have the receipts on that.
It is certainly ironic that, all these entities complaining about, $3 million. Well, maybe they could just cut out their advertising sponsor, their conference sponsoring budget.
Okay. I found my receipts for that. It's called Join Us at TGC 25, a gospel centrality that sends. It is a breakout hosted by the Send Network. So that's North American Mission Board. And it's got J.D. Greer also speaking at this. So again, the Southern Baptist Convention is not repenting of wokeness. They are still as woke as they ever were. They're in bed with the Gospel Coalition, which is maybe slightly less woke than it's ever been, but still pretty bad, still pretty corrupt.
I mean, even the title "Theology is for Everyone" is not true. Not everyone should be studying theology. Not everyone.
Ouch.
Not everyone's made to be a pastor. I understand. I think R.C. Sproul was big into democratizing theology, but that's just, it's abjectly false in its reality, because obviously it just leads to egalitarianism. And, there's a saying I have with women in theology is that they exist to justify the sins of women. And the first one being, female pastors. So. That's what happens when you say theology is for everyone. Your seminaries become basically mixed gendered, and they look like a regular college.
I think there's a sense in which you're right, because everyone should be catechized.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference between catechized and being a disciple versus being, studying advanced theology.
And to some degree, college is not for everyone. I think that's very obvious. Despite our generation being told if you didn't go to college, you'd be a failure. But I want to take some questions. Will she be in a position to teach men in church-related setting? If so, not right. I think Nancy Guthrie kind of seems to do a better job at avoiding teaching men. And let's see, how do we grow elders if not for proper theology? I'm not sure I understand that question.
Well,
but
yeah, and it goes back to seminaries should be male exclusive. So again, you're already
seminaries should be for training pastors, not for
Yes.
theological
So
education.
you could start there with the fact that our seminaries need to be cleaned up.
And theoretically, that would make seminaries probably cheaper.
And also, churches actually should be catechizing properly, which most churches, probably most SBC churches included, don't.
So we talked about the SBC being in bed with the Gospel Coalition's 2025 conference. Now I want to talk about the Southern Baptist Convention pushing a woke liturgical holiday. So this is an article that's not yet published on Evangelical Dark Web, but it is written. So they're promoting the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission pushed Racial Reconciliation Sunday for February 23, which is this Sunday, and includes multicultural messaging in the bulletins. And it's just, this is like the key quote. There's a disconnect for people in our culture when they see diversity in every other sphere of their lives, yet many churches remain monoethnic. By the year 2030, the majority of the working class will be non-white. And by the year 2060, 57% of the population will be non-white. In other words, the next generation will be multi-ethnic. If churches do not adjust their methodology for the changing mission field, they might miss reaching the next generation. This has obviously not come to pass. This is just liberal talking points from.
Oh, Yeah, I mean,
a few years ago.
Yeah, they would
really.
say if you decry the Great Replacement, you're a conspiracy theorist and so forth. I mean, they're just saying, yeah, the Great Replacement's happening, and we got to just change with the times instead of like fighting against it. You just have to succumb to being, displaced in your own country by foreigners.
Yeah, that's really what's driving this. It's not it's not, and it's not natural that this is happening. It's something that's being done because of government policy. And that's basically the last story that I want to talk about for tonight. I'll do a last call for questions before we wrap up, and let me catch up on the chat.
Well, even still, last week I had the story out about Lifeway. The Lifeway CEO basically saying that we have to use creative ways to get around, biblical prohibitions on female pastors. And Lifeway is a huge problem in the SBCs because they're supposed to be the publishing house, and they basically promote feminism through and through. Just go on their website, look at their most sponsored authors, and all of them but Tony Evans were women, and those women had atrocious theology if you looked into it. So
Tony Evans isn't great on theology either.
No. And he's MIA right now for reasons. And so Lifeway is another entity that's, a huge blown opportunity that's really just promoting a lot of this stuff. Because again, if they're not promoting wokeness, then they're promoting feminism. And, they're corrupt at the top, and, their CEO basically planted a church with a female pastor, who was trained at, Jeff Warg's Gateway Seminary. So again, it's all full circle as the SBC creates their own problems.
Right, and this is worse than a lot of comic book characters create their own villains. The Southern Baptist Convention is literally they are training the female pastor problem.
They're training it. They're going to their seminaries, then they're going out, then they might become, pastors or whatever at the churches or whatever.
Yeah, it might not be a Southern Baptist church, but a lot of them are in Southern Baptist churches and stuff like that. I think you called out one of the churches that got kicked out of the Southern Baptist Convention had a female pastor trained at a Southern Baptist seminary, right?
Yeah, multiple.
Okay.
It's a very as soon as you start digging into because I don't know if they've released their churches, their excommunication list this year, but that's coming up if they haven't done it. And often it is they're SBC trained.
So, seems like there's some debate in the chat about what elders, how theology is taught. And I'm not saying everyone needs a copy of a systematic theology. I mean, I have a copy of systematic theology, but it is good that some people just accept the gospel and believe it, and then they don't try to invent their own theology. I think that's a good thing.
I mean, I guess the bigger
we could use more of that.
Everyone's a theologian because we shouldn't democratize it in a sense. And it's kind of we don't need everyone becoming doctors and physicians. It's good if some people just know first aid at the bare minimum.
If everyone's a theologian, no one is.
Yeah.
I mean that's one way to look at it. But it's interesting, because we're all called to be disciples, but not everyone's gifted with the same level of spiritual gifts. Not trying to start that debate on spiritual gifts, but the teaching ones, the people who are gifted in more teaching areas, it's more suitable that they learn theology. A lot of these people who run apologetics ministries, they don't have good theology, or they don't have discernment. I'm a good discernment guy. I am not gifted very much at mass evangelizing or, just walk up to people on the street and talk to them about Jesus. I'm not very gifted at that. So there's different lanes that people can operate in. And of course, it benefits for me to know theology, so I can know right from almost right, as Charles Spurgeon once famously defined discernment as. And then I do wish apologetics people would know theology better. That could not hurt them.
I don't know if they don't know it. It's just that they disagree with it. When you're looking at a lot of the, Sean McDowell being notorious.
Hey, but who's actually doing the best apologetics work right now against
Wes Huff.
No, against Catholic and Eastern Orthodoxy.
Oh, you're going Stephen Wolfe.
Stephen Wolfe.
Which-
as far as apologetics for Protestantism, it's not Redeem Zoomer, and it's certainly not that liberal Gavin Ortland. It is Stephen Wolfe. He is making the best arguments
I mean,
against the supposedly trad phenomenon of Roman Catholicism and the other one.
I mean, fun
Eastern
fact.
Orthodox.
I finished the 18th subject or topic of Churton today, and question 34 is on basically the church and the civil magistrate. It's all about what powers does the magistrate have over the church? It talks about executing heretics as being the final step, and only for the most egregious offenders. It talks about how the magistrate is supposed to safeguard the church, defender of the faith, as the Anglicans would say, with regards to the English monarch. But it's like, wow, this was exactly what Stephen Wolfe talked about in Case for Christian Nationalism.
Yeah, I don't know how you can read the Old Testament and say that the government doesn't have the power to outlaw idolatry and or punish heretics. I don't know how you could read the Old Testament and not surmise that is a valid application of government.
I mean, he doesn't talk about burning mosques and synagogues, but obviously,
someone else did.
Well, yeah, someone else did. A guy named Martin talked about that. But yeah, I mean, again, it's strange. It's like, wow, Stephen Wolfe just ripped what from 36 pages of Churiton.
Yeah. So I think that's all I got for today. I wanted to keep this live stream on the shorter side, which it is. But anyway, that's a good deep dive and massive update on the Southern Baptist Convention. It is still woke in 2025, and it is on the verge of going broke. And I mean, His will will be done either way.
I mean, again, bankruptcy.
This is a liberal institution.
Bankruptcy can happen very quickly. Like, financial collapse is slow and then it's sudden. So always remember that.
So that's all I got for today. Stay based. Christ is King, and we will catch you on the next one.